So in case you can't, so I'm over in the US, so it is middle of the night here for me. So if you see my eyes drooping or something, just know, yeah, that's what happens here. But so let me throw up my screen. So I had to kind of debate what I wanted to cover with y'all today. So do we look at learning principles? Do we look at brain stuff? What do we want to look at? And I kind of landed here because I think as middle leaders, this is going to be wildly important for y'all. The transfer dilemma. Now, when I talk about transfer, I mean, how do human beings move skills, knowledge, abilities between different contexts? And so as a middle leader, a lot of what you're going to be doing is training, is working with other human beings, is leading them. And what you'll see a lot of the times is in the moment they're doing great. 2 days later, they're back to doing what they were doing before. And we're like, why didn't I have this impact? What happened? So that's going to be the frame we take a look at today. Now, I want to start off with a quick game. So here's how this game works. On your screen right now, there are 4 cards. Now, on the front of every card, there's going to be a letter. On the back of every card, there's going to be a number. Of course, you're only seeing one side of these cards, but trust me, every card's got a letter on one side, number on the other. Cool. Now, here is a rule. If there is a vowel on the front of the card, there has to be an even number on the back of it. So again, we got 4 cards, letter one side, number on the other. Rule, vowel on front has to be an even number on back. Question, how many of these 4 cards do you need to flip over and see the other side of to see if that rule holds true with these 4 cards in front of you? So have a think, see what you come up with. Okay. Now, if we were all together, I'd take a little straw poll. I don't think I can't see you guys anymore. I only see my screen, unfortunately, but maybe you all can see each other. Raise your hand if you think the answer is 1. You can prove that rule by just flipping 1 card. Now, raise your hand if you think it's 2. Anyone for 3? Raise your hand if you think it's 4. We have to see the back of all 4. Raise your hand if you think it's 0. You just trust me completely. That's good. So here we go. If we were together, you'd see we're all over the shop. Some of us right now are thinking 1, 2, 3, 4. We're everywhere. So the answer to this question is going to be revealed later. I promise we'll come back to that. But first, I just want to shift gears. So we're about to talk about transfer. Now, I needed some through line to kind of tie the whole transfer process together. And so I landed on this, competencies, these 21st century skills. You know what these things are. They're like critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, communication, all these big kind of buzzwords right now in education. Now, a lot of progressive educators have kind of adopted these competencies to fight against what was called the Prussian factory model of education. So this is the education model that says, give me individual students and I'm going to pump out automaton employees. We hated this model, so along comes 21st century skills. In fact, a group called Partnership for 21st Century Skills got together in 2001. They landed on these 4 skills and their competencies and they said, this is the future of education. 4 years later, it was adopted across the US. 2 years after that, it got to Australia. Whoop-de-doo. Now, I got no problem with the competencies. I think they're wonderful. Collaboration, go to town. Cool. The one thing no one ever stops to ask, though, is why these 4? Like, of all the thousands of competencies we could have selected, right? Morality, kindness, stewardship of the environment, all these different things we could have selected. How did we land on these particular 4? It turns out we know exactly why. The Partnership for 21st Century Learning is a group comprised of 6 different entities: AOL, Time Warner, Apple Computer, SAP, Cisco, Dell, and Microsoft. You're at the tech convention. Congratulations. They all got together in 2001. They settled on these 4 because those are the competencies important to our organizations today, and they will become even more important in the future. That's right. This entire 21st century skills movement that progressive educators use to fight back against a model of education that pumps out employees were hand-selected by companies to make sure education pumps out better employees. Now, again, I got nothing wrong with this. I think this is hilarious that most people just never stop to ask, is this really what we want to be doing still? But regardless, let's just accept it. 21st century skills, cool. This is what we want to do. Turns out we still got a pretty significant problem. And that problem is this. Right now, let me just hide my floating menu. I know that gets in the way. Right now, if you want to graduate from University of Melbourne, so that's where I was teaching for the last 6 years. Gosh, let me rephrase that, 12 years. Man, it's been a while. If you want to graduate from that school, you have to demonstrate what's called our graduate attributes. So those are basically our 21st century skills. We will not send you into the world until you have demonstrated creativity, until you have proven you have critical thinking skills. Now, here's the problem. Of all the kids who graduate and go into the workforce, 48% of them will get fired within the first 6 months of their first job, and the remaining will take anywhere between 16 and 24 months before they begin demonstrating the skills that we just told the world they have. So here we've got a group of people showing skills in one context. As soon as they change context, those skills disappear. What the heck just happened? And it turns out it's not just young kids. This is across the board. Ron Johnson, this is the creative genius, and those are his words, not mine, behind the Apple iStore. So this guy's the guy who invented the Apple iStore. He just demonstrated on the world's biggest stage, I am creative. What happens? Struggling retailer JCPenney poaches him. They say, come over, be our CEO, use your creativity to save our company. And 17 months and $6 billion in losses later, JCPenney fires his bum, not an ounce of creativity to be found. So here we've got a guy who just showed I got a skill on the world's biggest stage, changes context, skill disappears. Carly Fiorina, she's the woman who brought Lucent Technologies into one of the top tech companies in the world. She was known as the collaboration guru. She could get teams to work together. That was her thing. What happens? She's poached by another company, HP. They're struggling. They say, come be our CEO, work your magic here. And a divided board and 30,000 layoffs later, they fire her bum. No collaboration to be found. She couldn't even get 12 people around a table to collaborate. I just proved to the world I got it. Change context. Wah, wah. It disappears. What is going on? Welcome to the transfer dilemma. Now, I'm going to give you the big secret right here at the beginning of our session. Here we go. Transfer will never happen automatically. Transfer has never happened automatically. It will never, it cannot happen automatically. Transfer is a conscious process we have to walk through. And those people who understand that process are the fastest and easiest to transfer things out. In fact, biologically, we are built to not transfer. Our body, our biology, our DNA, it does not want to transfer. So this is why it is a conscious thing we have to go through. Now, if you want to transfer anything, there are kind of 3 hurdles you need to hop over. So hurdle number 1 for transfer is this: knowledge. Now, what does this mean? To understand what this hurdle represents, I want to shift gears real fast. So the human brain, cognition, for the longest time, we used to think human beings thought like calculators. Now, the way a calculator works is simple. On this side of the calculator, you have skills, abilities, processes. On this side of the calculator, you have knowledge, facts, data. Now, the way a calculator works is so long as you have a skill mapped to a button, then it doesn't matter what information you put in, you can use your skill. So like here, I have addition mapped to a button. Now it doesn't matter what I put in. I could do 321 plus 587 plus 952. Doesn't matter what you put in, so long as you've got a skill mapped down, you can use your skill. So that brings us back to our game. So here's what I want to do. I want to play a different game with you. So don't worry about the first game. For this new game, I want you to imagine you are a bartender. Yay! So this game's a little more fun. Now, in our bar, we only serve 2 drinks. We serve beer, so alcohol, and we serve Coca-Cola, non-alcohol. Now, you all know the drinking age limit in Australia is 18 years old. So rule is you can't serve a beer to a kid under 18. Otherwise, you just broke the law. So here's how these cards work. On the front of every card is the drink order, either beer or Coke. On the back is the age of the person who ordered that drink. Now, y'all know you can't serve a kid under 18 a beer. Otherwise, you're toast. I want you to imagine this order just went out to a table. Question: how many of these 4 cards do you need to flip over and see the other side of to make sure this was a kosher order and that you didn't just accidentally screw up and break the law? So again, we got beer, Coke on the front, age on the back, can't serve a kid under 18 a beer. How many of these cards do you need to see the other side of to make sure this order is fine and you didn't just screw up? Now, again, if I was all with you, I'm pretty sure you all were getting this one pretty easily. What's my answer for this one? 2. Don't make it harder than it's got to be. What is it? Beer and 11. Why do I got to flip beer? Make sure that kid is over 18. Why do I got to flip 11? Make sure I didn't just give that kid a beer. Do I care who's drinking a Coke? Do I care what a 31-year-old is drinking? On the front of every card is a letter. On the back of every card is a number. Rule is if there's a vowel on the front of the card, there has to be an even number on the back of it. Question: how many of these 4 cards do you need to flip over, see the other side of, to see if that rule holds true here? Now, again, if we were live, you'd see we're still kind of all over the shop. Some of you are still thinking 1, 2, 3, 4. But how many of you recognize that this question here is literally the exact same one as this? It's just with different words. All I did was change the words. So what's my answer? 2. Which ones? A and 3. I told you it's exactly the same. Why do I got to flip A? Make sure there's an even number on the back of it. Why do I got to flip 3? Make sure there isn't a vowel on the back of that. Did I ever say a B has to have something on the back of it? Did I ever say an even number has to have something on the back of it? How many of you now recognize that this question is exactly the same as this, and you're still confused? If you are, that's perfect. That's exactly what I want. Here's what I want you to recognize. You all just showed me you have a skill. When I asked you a question about a context you understand, beer, Coke, drinking age limits, you were able to use your skill just fine. But as soon as I changed context into a realm you didn't quite understand, what happened to your ability to use that skill? It disappeared. Sad fact is this: human beings do not think like calculators. My goodness, I wish we did. It would make our life so much easier. But in human beings, there is no such thing as a standalone skill that once you've got it, you can apply it wherever you want to. In human beings, all of our skills are intimately dependent on the knowledge, the facts we have to use that skill with. If we do not understand the facts, there is no skill there for us to use. Now, hear this again, because this is wildly important. In human beings, we do not have standalone skills. All of our skills are tied to the knowledge we have to use that skill with. If we do not understand the facts, the knowledge, there is no skill there for us to use. So our motto for this first hurdle of transfer becomes this: facts always precede skills. Facts always precede skills. Now, some people get really mad at me when I say this, and that's fine. You can get as mad as you want. The problem is I could prove this to you 7 days a week, twice on Sunday. Love it or hate it, this is a fact of human cognition. This is the game we are playing. So just as another example, let's go back to our 21st century skills. So critical thinking, that's one of the big competencies we want. Now, I guarantee you have the skill of critical thinking. I promise you have this. You wouldn't have gotten this far in your career if you didn't. You've been using it with me for the last 10 minutes. Congratulations, you can critically think. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a story, and I want you to use your critical thinking skills with this story here. Okay, so this would have been about 12 years ago now. In the Journal of Behavioral Brain and Medicine, an article was published that demonstrated that when neutrinos in the left medial temporal lobe started to spin in a clockwise fashion, this generated a radio signal detectable by bold MRI recordings. Now, using your critical thinking skills, I want you to tell me what methodologically went wrong with that research, or if it's accurate, what does that suggest about how we've been analyzing MRI data for the last 4 decades? So go ahead, use your critical thinking skills and tell me what's what. Tell me what's going on. Uh-oh, you can't do it. Why? Because you don't have the skill of critical thinking? No, because you don't understand the knowledge. It doesn't matter how deep your skills are. If you do not understand the facts, there is no skill there for you to use. Facts always precede skills. So our first hurdle of transfer is knowledge. We have to lock down facts if we ever hope to move anywhere in any field, basically. So what is a fact? So if hurdle number 1 of transfer relies on facts, what are we talking about? To understand what we mean when we say facts, we got to take a quick look at memory. So the way memory works is like this. Anytime you form a memory for something new, your memory will become tied to the time and place where you learned it. So we call these episodic memories. They are little episodes in your life. So example, imagine this is me. Excuse me, this is my first time ever seeing this big metal Eiffel Tower thing. I've never heard of it before. I don't know what it is. This is it. For the rest of my life, my memory for the Eiffel Tower will be tied to that Tuesday afternoon, that kid with the yellow backpack, those clouds in the sky. If I ever want to think about it, I have to mentally transport myself back to that day and say, oh yeah, that Eiffel Tower, I remember seeing that thing, cool. Now what happens? A couple days after this, I'm sitting in a cafe having a drink and wouldn't you know it, what's that on my mug? It's that Eiffel Tower thing I saw a couple days ago. I love that thing. Now I've got 2 episodic memories, day in the park, day in the cafe. A couple days later, I'm in a museum, and wouldn't you know it, it is a painting of that Eiffel Tower thing I saw. Oh my gosh, I love that. Now I've got 3 episodic memories, day in the park, day in the cafe, day in the museum. What happens is the more episodic memories you make, your brain will start to compare and contrast them, and it will pull out any similarities. Any ingredient that's the same amongst all of your episodic memories, it will pull that out, create a brand new, context-less, standalone memory in your brain that we call a semantic memory. This is what we mean by facts. When we say this first hurdle, knowledge is predicated on facts, what we're saying is it's predicated upon the formation of semantic memories, standalone information in your brain that you can now do stuff with without having to mentally travel into some episode in your life. So just because this is important, let's see it again. Imagine all these little dots are your episodic memories. You got day in the park, day in the cafe, day in the museum. What happens, we make all these memories, like maybe we read about it in a book, maybe I saw it in a movie. The brain will start to compare, contrast all them, pull out any similarities, create a brand new standalone semantic memory. Boom, you are now over the knowledge hurdle. Now we can move on to the next stage. So if hurdle number one is knowledge, and knowledge is predicated on the formation of semantic memories, what do we need at this stage of transfer, at this stage of learning? Exposure and repetition. You need multiple episodic memories to create a semantic fact. So how many? If I need multiple episodics, how many episodics do I need to make a semantic? You probably caught on. Unfortunately, there is no one answer to that. I wish there was. Sometimes one is enough, right? You grab a hot iron. You don't need to do that 10 times till you're like, oh, wait, irons are hot, y'all. I got this. Don't touch that. One, enough. Sometimes you can make hundreds. Like I've passed 10 tests on the periodic table in my life. I couldn't tell you anything about it today. So I've got dozens and dozens of episodic memories, no semantic facts whatsoever. So unfortunately, there is no one answer, but there is a rule of thumb. With about 80% accuracy, we can tell if someone has built a semantic fact based on whether or not they have 3 episodic memories. That seems to be kind of the sweet spot. 3 or more, there's an 80% chance you have a semantic. 2 or fewer, 80% chance you don't. It's not perfect, but it's kind of a good rule of thumb. Now, who cares? Why are we talking about this? This is all really super interesting, but why do we care? Here, as a leader, you're going to be training. You're going to be running meetings. You're going to be trying to inspire other people to act in new ways. And immediately after your training, you've noticed this. You go to a conference, you're feeling good. You're like, oh, I can't wait to go implement these. Oh, my whole practice is going to change. It's going to be great. 1 week later, you go back, you're like, what the heck was I so excited about? What was I supposed to do? This happens to all of us. Why? Why could we spend a great meeting learning new stuff and not change a thing? Or a great day at a conference and go back and nothing changes? Do you understand now? When I teach you something new, you've got how many episodic memories? 1. Is that enough to build a semantic? This is the big problem. No matter how much we want to inspire and teach and lead other human beings, if all we do is give them one exposure to something, it's never going to be enough for them to do anything with. It's always going to stay in episodic memory in their brain. No skills can be brought to bear on it, unfortunately. So step one of this kind of transfer issue is we've got to think about multiple episodic memories. We need more than one-offs if we ever want to learn anything. That makes this session a bit funny, is because I'm going to teach you some stuff. You'll learn some stuff, but if I could get you an extra couple of days, man, I'm going to be able to teach you a whole lot more. You're going to be able to lock a lot more of this down. Just a sad fact of kind of the structure we're stuck with, though. But there you go. So if we're talking about making multiple episodic memories to pull out a semantic, there are 4 kind of rules we've got to think about when doing this. So there are more rules than this. I just wanted to give you 4 to help us kind of build better memories. So rule number 1 is this: sleep is essential. I want to show you something. Imagine I give you an episodic memory today. So we spent all of today learning something new and you got it. You're feeling really good. I want to show you what's going to happen to your memory for what you learned today over the next week. Check this out. Oh, yes, it is a sad fact. Human beings lose about 60 to 70% of everything we learn every day within the next 48 hours, and another 5 to 10% in the 5 days after that. Our memory is horrible. But check this out. What if instead of doing a lot of training today, I just did a little training today, little training the next day, little training the day after that? Watch what happens to your memory now. Oh, hey ho. Now, with no additional work, we get a 30 to 60% boost in our memory and comprehension. Why? Because what do we do at the end of every day? We sleep. And what do we do when we sleep, whether we know we're doing it or not? We dream. And what is dreaming? Dreaming is when we think we are locking our memories down. That's when the brain says, cool, I'm going to take that memory. I'm going to make that a permanent memory for you. You don't sleep, you don't dream. Now, the problem is this: if you make 3 episodic memories in one day, when you go to sleep that night, your brain will squish those together. It will become a single episodic memory that day you did that thing 3 times. So if we know we need 3 or more episodic memories to create a semantic, now we see you have to sleep in between each one of those to make this a meaningful process. So already we're looking at 3 days minimum. We got to be playing with ideas before they become useful in any kind of way, shape, or form. This, by the way, is why cramming works so dang well. You cram tonight, you will pass your test tomorrow. 2 weeks from now, you will not pass that test because you simply won't have locked anything down. But if instead of cramming tonight, you give me a little bit tonight, a little bit tomorrow, a little bit the night after that, now you'll pass the test tomorrow, and you'll pass the same test 2 months from now because you will have had enough time to lock those memories down, build your semantic facts, off you go. So just know sleep is essential. We need multiple exposures. We need time if we ever hope to influence or get new ideas, facts to other people. Idea number 2 when it comes to building these memories is here. Now, this comes from an old psych story that I read. So this is an old physiology textbook from the 1850s. This is what I read in my spare time here. So this tells a story. So we're in the 1850s. We've got this delivery man, and he's got this really expensive package he has to deliver. But it's the 1850s. It's hot. It's noon. So he decides, I'm just going to go tie one on instead. This guy ends up drinking a little too much, blacks out. He wakes up the next day sober. He's feeling fine. But guess what he can't find? Guess what he lost? That package. He has no clue where the heck he put it. So this guy's going around town looking for it. He's trying to retrace his steps. By the end of the day, it said he had 5 of his bosses that are all looking for this thing. No one can find it. Guess what they did to jog his memory? Gave him a drink. As soon as this guy was drunk, he was able to walk him right to where he'd left the package the night before. Yeah, my bad. So what do we learn here? Rule number 2, context matters. We like to think that we take information in clean. We do not. Your memory for this session isn't going to be my words. It's going to be my words mixed with the feeling of that chair against your body. Whatever temperature is in the air around you, whatever you're smelling, feeling around, internal, are you hungry? Are you thirsty? Are you sad? Are you tired? Are you happy? All of this gets tied up with each new memory you make and dictates how you can access those memories later. Think about it like this. When the military trains for combat, do they train like this? Like we're going to do 10 hours of Call of Duty and we'll be ready to go. Yay. Heck no. How does a military train for combat? High tension, high stress, live ammo. Why do they train like this? Because what's a war situation like? High tension, high stress, live ammo. What they're doing is they're building context into the learning. So when they hit that context later, it's much easier for them to access and utilize that learning. So go back to our kind of ideas. If we need 3 episodics to make a semantic, remember the semantic is anything similar in your episodic memories. So if you do an equation on a chalkboard in a green room today, and a book in a red room tomorrow, TV blue room the third day, what's the only similarity? The equation. So what does your semantic say? Cool, that's an equation you can use. Awesome. But imagine if you did chalkboard green room today, chalkboard green room tomorrow, chalkboard green room the third day. What's similar here? Everything. So what's your semantic going to say? Well, it's an equation that goes on a chalkboard in a green room. Cool. So we start to see context matters. The context of your episodic memories will ultimately determine the content of your semantic memory. So do we want to build context in? Like if you have a performance on that stage next week, I'm going to be having you practice on that stage. I'm going to build so much context into your episodic memories that you're good on that stage. Might not be good anywhere else, but my God, you got it there. But if you, let's say you want to be good at something generally, like I want to be good at basketball everywhere. Now we got to practice everywhere. Outside, inside, upstairs, downstairs, nighttime, daytime, raining, snowing, hot. Practice in as many different locations, contexts as you can. Strip context away. You'll have a more freely movable semantic fact. So context matters. Now, beware of this. We got some people at the tech conference. Tech is a context. You probably noticed this from COVID when we had our big lockdowns. Kids were doing fine online. They came into school and all of a sudden it was like they didn't learn a thing. It was a context issue. They learned stuff. They had just tied it to this little box on a desk at their home. And now when they were in a classroom with a bunch of kids screaming at them, were they able to easily access all that learning? Wasn't that they didn't get it. They just context. They tied it to the wrong context. We just had to spend extra time pulling that learning back out in this new context to make it worthwhile. So just know context matters. Are we building it in? Or are we pulling it out? Idea number 3 for these memories is here. Memory is constructive. Now, what the heck does that mean? To understand, let's talk real quick. Deep memory. So we want to build deep, durable, lasting memories that we can use. Question, what do you think the key ingredient is if you want to build a deep memory? What does a moment or an event or a fact have to have if you want to form a deep memory for that thing? Now, if you're anything like us, you're immediately going right to emotions. If something is emotional or personal, boom, you're going to make a big old memory for it. But if something is just kind of neutral, boop, you might make a little baby memory. Now, that's true. There is certainly some truth to this. It's not wrong, but it can't be the big secret. Otherwise, tell me, why do you know this so dang well?
Lucky you're with Amy.
I don't think any of us are emotionally invested in the "Lucky I'm with Amy" jingle. Like, we don't go home and pop that on our stereo and we're like, oh, finally, that's my jam. There it is. So here, jingles. These are things we have ridiculously deep memories for, yet no one is emotionally invested in it at all. So it turns out emotions can't really be the big secret. So, okay, if we assume everything gets into the brain then about the same, what do you think our next theory was? Must be pure repetition, right? See it again, memory gets bigger. See it again, memory gets bigger. Just keep shoving that thing into your brain time and time again. Your memory will get bigger, bigger, bigger. Now, again, that's kind of true. It's not wrong, but it can't be the big secret. Otherwise, tell me, without cheating, which of these logos is accurate? Now, you've seen this logo thousands of times. You have repeated this ad nauseum. You've put it into your brain time and time again. So which is it? And why is it that almost no one recognizes it is none of those? Looks like this. But here's something that we have all repeated forever, yet no one's got a deep memory for. And if you got that from memory, try and draw a coin. Like, what does the front of a coin look like? Draw it down, man. You're not even going to be close. So here's another thing. We've seen it thousands of times, yet no one's got a deep memory for. Turns out when it comes to deep, durable, lasting memories, we've always been looking in the wrong spot. We've been so focused on how information goes into the brain that we miss the big trick. You want a deep, durable, lasting memory? Has a little bit to do with how it goes in, absolutely, but it has a lot more to do with how you take it out. Access a memory, and that memory gets deeper. Access it again, and that memory gets deeper. Memory is constructive. The more you access, pull out, utilize memories, the deeper, more durable, easier to access in the future those memories become. We call this concept recall. The key to deep, durable, lasting memories is recall, pulling memories out. The reason why we remember radio jingles so well isn't because we've heard them a million times. It's because we've sung them a million times. And every time you hum along or step into coals and go down, down, presses get down, man, you're just making that memory deeper, deeper, deeper. And the reason why we don't remember logos isn't because we haven't built a memory for it. It's because when was the last time anyone asked you to pull that memory out? It's in there. It's just really small until you start accessing it. So think about it like this. How many of our kids love this type of question, multiple choice? Why? Because they don't got to do anything. Have a read, see what resonates, off you go. Does this type of question do much to boost your memory? A little bit, but not a ton. How many of our kids hate this type of question? Open-ended. Why? Because they got to do the work. But that work is the thing that activates the memory machinery, is the thing that makes that memory deeper. So for our meetings, for learning, for training, how can we be doing recall? Can we open our meetings with recall? Start bringing up, what did we talk about last meeting? What during our last discussion together, what were the things we were talking about? Can we do it at the end of meeting? All right, final 5 minutes. Let's do a group notes. I'll say a topic. You tell me everything we talked about. What was important today? Can we do recall in between? Can we be sending out email blasts that say, all right, here's 3 big topics that we talked about this week. Can you tell me a little bit about each? We're just trying to recall, build those deep memories so that we can really pull out an effective semantic fact. And by the way, most human beings, not just kids, this is across the board, when they have to study, they do what's called passive review. I'm going to reread this book. I'm going to reread my notes. I'm going to rewatch that lecture. If all you're doing is putting the information back into your brain, is that doing a ton for your memory? No, you want to turn study into an effective use of your time. What do you got to be doing? Recall, pulling it out, quiz yourself, teach somebody else, do some flashcards, take a practice exam, have a debate about somebody about a topic. Anything to get you pulling it out, that's where you're getting the juice for your study time. So how can we be pulling in and inspiring recall rather than simply passive review? And the last principle I want to talk about when it comes to memories is here. I want to play one final game with you. Now, here's what we're going to do. This is a memory game. Of course, we're talking about memories. So I'm going to read you a list of words. All I want you to do is I want you to sit and listen to that list of words. And when I'm done reading it, I want you to spend about 20 seconds recalling as many of those words as you can in any order you want. We're trying to build a deep memory for this list. So again, I'm going to read you the list. You memorize. When I'm done, 20 seconds, recall as many as you can, any order you want. Now we're going to play this game twice because most people aren't really ready for the first round. You will always do better on the second one. So just know if you kind of screw up the first one, there's another one coming. It's fine. But here we go. List number 1. You listen, then recall. Here we go. List 1. White, dark, cat, night, funeral, color, grief, blue, death, ink, bottom, coal, brown, gray. Over to you. 20 seconds. Recall, recall, recall. Okay. All right. Let's start to bring it back in. Okay, now that you've done it once and you know how long the list is and we're used to it, let's just do it again. Same thing now that we're kind of in the groove. I'm going to read you a brand new list of words. All you've got to do is sit and listen. When I'm done, 20 seconds, recall as many as you can, any order you want. We're going for deep memories for this list. Here we go. List number 2. Hard, light, pillow, plush, loud, cotton, fur, touch, fluffy, feather, furry, kitten, skin, tender. Over to you, 20 seconds. Okay. All right, let's start to bring it back in. So here's what we're going to do. I want you to just put those lists in the back of your mind. We're going to let your brain kind of do its thing for a second. I want to change gears, and I promise you we're going to come back. So real quick, we're talking about memories. Now, memories got to go somewhere in your brain. They got to get stored in there. So pop quiz, where in your brain are your memories stored? Where do they go in there? Maybe it's in the middle, like the hippocampus. Maybe back here in the cerebellum. Is it in the front? Turns out the answer is we don't know. We got no clue, man. We have been looking for these things for decades. We got no clue where they go. They're not in the cells. They're not between the cells. They're not in the networks. In fact, right now, our biggest theory is that memories are holographic, which means they are literally everywhere, yet nowhere simultaneously. Now, if that sounds absolutely absurd, that just shows you how little we get this. So we don't know where memories go up there, but we do know this. There are 2 kind of flavors of memory that when you can pull them up, when you can recall them. So the first flavor of recall is what you call remember. That's when you could absolutely pull up a memory. You know it's completely accurate. I'm living it right now. Like I remember eating breakfast on my table over there this morning. 100%, that's a memory I got. I'm doing it right now. The other flavor is when you just kind of know something happened. Like this is when it's, you can kind of pull up a memory, but you can't really complete it. It feels right. Almost like that tip of the tongue effect. Like I know last week I would have eaten breakfast at that table. I just couldn't tell you anything about it. So remember, that's when you absolutely can pull up a memory. No, that's when it just kind of feels right, but you can't really lock it down. So, okay, this brings us back to our game. So here's what we're going to do. On your screen, I'm going to pop up 6 words. Now, these words may or may not have been on list number 1. So all we care about is list number 1. I want you to have a read and answer to yourself, yes or no, the word was or it wasn't on list 1. And if it was, do you remember it? Or do you just kind of know that it was? So again, 6 words, only caring about list 1, yes or no, it was there. And if it was, do you remember it? Or do you just kind of know it? Have a read of those. Okay, now I'm going to put up 6 more words, which may or may not have been on list number 2. So again, just caring about list 2, yes or no, the word was or it wasn't there. If it was, do you remember it or just kind of know it? Have a read of those. All right. Now here's what we're going to do. We're going to zoom into a couple of word pairs and we're going to learn something interesting about memory and how it works. So let's start here. White and hard. So I can't see you, but y'all can see each other. Raise your hand if you think white was on list 1 or you think hard was on list 2. You got at least one or the other. That's why we did 2 lists. Cool. Now keep your hands raised if you remember these words. Awesome. Why? If I was there, you'd see most of you have your hands raised. Why do we remember these 2 words so dang much? What was unique about them? They were the first words on each list. List 1 started with white. List 2 started with hard. We call this the primacy effect. When it comes time to start learning, human beings tend to remember and anchor on the very first thing out of the gate. How learning starts is all important to how we form our memories. By the way, this is why if you've ever like watched a James Bond film and it starts with like a 10-minute action sequence that's really cool, but it has nothing to do with the rest of the film, they know you're going to remember this and we can just kind of phone in the rest. So primacy effect. All right, let's move to a gray and tender. So raise your hand if you think gray was on list 1 or tender was on list 2, or you got at least one or the other. Again, keep your hands raised if you remember those words. Boom. Now, if I was there, you'd see most of y'all have your hands raised. Why? Why do we remember these two so dang well? These were the last words on each list. List 1 ended with gray. List 2 ended with tender. We call this the recency effect. Primacy effect, we tend to remember and anchor on the first thing out of the gate. Recency effect, we also tend to remember and anchor on the last thing out of the gate. How learning starts and stops is all important for how we build memories. All right, let's move into, I think it's bird and, oh no, shoot, sorry, black and soft. So raise your hand if you think black was on list 1 or soft was on list 2. You got at least one or the other. Cool. Now keep your hands raised if you remember these words. Boom. Again, if I was there, you'd see most of you have your hands raised. Even though I absolutely never said either the word black or the word soft. Those two words never left my mouth. Uh-oh. Now, why do you think I said these? So go back to list 1. I start with white. I end with gray. I know you're going to remember these. What was I activating? Color. And then what did I fill the middle of the list with? Night. Dark, cat, funeral. I'm getting you to think black, but I ain't never said it. Now jump over here. I start with hard, end with tender. I'm activating touch. Then what did I fill the middle of the list with? The pillow and fluffy and kitten. Oh, I'm getting you to think soft, but I ain't never said it. Now here's the problem. Most of you won't have just thought I said these words. Most of you will have remembered me saying these words. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a false memory. And that's how easy these things are. Our final principle is this. Our memories are constantly rewritten. We like to think our memories are clean. They are not. Anytime you recall a memory, we don't know where your memories go in your brain. We don't know where they exist. But anytime you recall a memory, you start thinking about it. So think about what you had for breakfast this morning. As you're thinking about it, that memory will leave your brain, and now it exists only on what's called your working memory, this little bit in the front of your brain. It exists nowhere but here. And while you're thinking about it, you now can do anything you want to it. You can add something to it. You can take something out of it. You can cut a little corner out of it. You can staple it to something else. And when you're done thinking about it, what do you have to do? Put it back in your brain. But when it goes back, it will go back different. It will go back with all those changes. Your old memory is dead. It doesn't exist anymore. All you have is the new one. And so far as you know, that is what that memory has always been. You will fight to prove that that was the memory all along. So like if you've ever had that fight with someone that says, you said this. No, I didn't. I said this. No, you didn't. You said this. Why would I say that? I said this. Which of you is right? You both are. You've simply changed your memories in the interim and you're fighting from what you believe is right. But if you rewind the clock, it was just a problem with our memory. So if we just learned recall is key to deep, durable, lasting memory. So we're going to be having people recall a lot. But here we learn that every time you recall something, you can change it. Then this means we need some sort of feedback. If we're going to be using recall, you need to have something to bounce that memory against to make sure it stays accurate. If I have nothing to bounce it against and it's wrong, I'll put it back wrong and I'll fight to prove to you that that's what you told me. So this is one of the reasons why I like flashcards. I said, "Ain't good." Recall in the front. What's the capital of Germany? Well, it's Paris. If I had nothing to check it against, sweet, I will put it back as Paris. And my goodness, if you ever tell me it's different, I'll say, no, it is Paris. But flashcard says, sweet, what's the capital of Germany? Paris. Flip it over. Here's your feedback. Nope, it's actually Berlin. Ah, my bad. So recall for deep memories, feedback for accurate memories. Recall deepens them. Feedback ensures they stay the same without us changing them in the interim. So just know, if we're going to be doing recall, this concept of feedback is how we keep things sharp without just people going in completely different directions. So that's hurdle number 1 for transfer, knowledge. I need to understand the facts of a field if I ever want to move my skills, my abilities into that field. Hurdle number 2 then is this. Oh, by the way, our transfer, we're going to learn 3 big transfer lessons. Number 1, skill transfer requires new domain knowledge. That's your first lesson of transfer. This was Ron Johnson's problem. By the way, it's now pretty much believed when he moved from Apple to JCPenney, he never took the time to learn their customers, their products. He didn't know anything about the company. He just started doing his stuff, and that's what caused him to fail. He never went over this first hurdle. Hurdle number 2 then is contextualization. Here's where we learn that skills, abilities, competencies, Those are just umbrella terms we use for a bunch of sub-skills, and those sub-skills are necessarily going to change context by context. So think about it like this. Take something like collaboration. That's one of our 21st century skills. If you ever go to an operating room with us when we're doing brain surgery, collaboration is a very specific thing. Here's what it looks like. You do your job, I do my job. We trust each other's expertise completely. There is no talking really in the room. There's absolutely no debating. It's a very quiet place. Yet at any time, if anyone has a feeling or something they need to say, from the lowest to the highest, all they have to do is say stop. Everyone will literally stop. That person has the floor. That is collaboration in an operating room. Come to my lab, oh, collaboration is totally different. Here, I'm going to pit my expertise against yours. We're going to battle to see whose expertise can make better sense of the data we're trying to talk about. We're still collaborating. We're just doing something totally different. And I've never worked at a place like Google or an innovation hub, but I imagine collaboration there is totally different. Again, there is no expertise. We're trying to build a collective expertise. So we throw a bunch of junk against a wall, see what sticks. And all three of these examples, you're collaborating. You're just doing something totally different. So if hurdle number one says knowledge, I need to understand the facts. Hurdle number two says, yeah, now you need to use those facts to redefine your skills. How do these facts change what we mean when we say something like creativity? How do these facts redefine effective communication? Now, when we talk about this idea of contextualization, there are kind of three levels of contextualization we have to move through. The first is called activate and associate your knowledge. So this is a semantic fact in your brain. Now, you've got semantic facts riddled everywhere. Phase one of contextualization says, how do these facts glom together? Say, these two seem to go together under a single heading. These three seem to glom together. These are what we call concepts. A fact is a little binary semantic thing. It's yes, no, it's on, off. A concept is simply how are you organizing? How are you grouping those facts into coherent units? Now, why is it important to group our facts? It's important here. Can you quickly and easily memorize all those letters for me? I'm guessing you're struggling. There's just a few too many, but check this out. What if I just rearrange the spacing? Can you memorize them all now? Well, shoot, now you got no problem. Why? What just happened? Is there more information? No, it's the same amount of information. It's just now you've got them organized. The ability to organize our semantic facts into coherent concepts is what allows us to think about vast amounts of information without ever taxing what's called our working memory. We can pull up vast amounts of facts, and now we can start to use our skills on those facts because they're organized. It frees up cognition. So at this stage of contextualization, here's where you'll see human beings, we should be doing things like paraphrasing. We should be summarizing. We should be associating. We're showing how all of our facts that we just took the time to learn kind of fit together. So strategies here, could we be doing concept maps? Could we be doing metaphors, analogies? Could we be generalizing? Some thinking routines. Could you be doing a see, think, wonder, an explanation game, word, phrase, sentence? You'll see all these things are basically saying, how are you pooling that information together into coherent units? Level two of contextualization says now you need to elaborate and expand your concepts. If a concept is simply an organizing principle, then that means, yeah, a concept could be these two facts, but different day, different circumstances could be these two. And now that I think about it, it really, a different day could be these two. Here's where we start to rip, pull, bend, tweak our concepts. If a concept isn't a thing, then this is where we start to see where are the edges? Where does it bend? Where does it break? How far can I move this in different directions? Now, the best example I've ever seen of concept shifting this level of contextualization is this little video here. The learning pit.
I was working with a group of students recently and they were studying tourism. So I asked them, well, what is a tourist? And they said, a tourist is someone who visits another place. I said, does that make me a tourist today then? I'm visiting another place, your school. And they said, no, you have to be having fun. I said, I am having fun. I overheard one of them saying, it's weird him, isn't he? I said, what is a tourist if it's not just visiting another place then? And they said, well, it's somebody who takes photographs when they visit that other place. I said, I've been taking photographs of your school as I've been walking around. They said, okay, but you have to spend money. I've said, I've spent money coming here today and I'm going to spend money on my lunch. They said, oh, you've got an answer for everything. I said, I'm not trying to give that impression. What I'm trying to do is find out what you think a tourist is. How could we find out more? They said, well, we can go and look in the books, we can look online. I said, great, I'll give you 20 minutes. Go and do your research, come back, and we'll see where we go from there. The teachers who were watching that lesson said their children were far more animated than normal, particularly when it came to the research. The students were in groups. One child would say, "See, I told you a tourist is someone who goes on tour." Another one says, "Yes, but we could go on tour and not be tourists. For example, go on a tour of our school." And somebody else said, "Oh yes, but it's about being on holiday." And they said, "But I've been on holiday. We were all on holiday in the summer holidays. It doesn't mean that we were tourists for that whole summer holiday." One girl said, "I know you're a tourist if you think you're a tourist." And she was very smug about her answer. But another girl said, "Hang on a minute. I've just been on holiday. My baby sister didn't think of herself as a tourist, and yet probably she was." And it's about this idea of getting students to question, to challenge, to wonder together.
The learning pit. Now, y'all have probably heard this term before. Today, it's now usually used just to say whenever a kid is struggling, they're in the learning pit. And that's fine. That's all it's there for. But originally, it was specifically talking about this aspect of contextualization. Concept shifting. Notice I can't throw you in the pit with a fact. If I say, "Hey, what's the capital of Australia?" and you say Canberra, and I say, "Are you sure?" "Yeah." "Are you really sure?" "Well, yeah, look, it is either is or it isn't." But if I say, "What is a capital city?" What defines a capital city? "Well, it's a seat of government." "What about Harrisburg?" "I don't think there's any government there." "Oh, maybe it's the biggest city." "Well, what about Sacramento? That's smaller than LA." "Oh, now you've got to redefine, rearrange your facts to come out with a broader, more nuanced concept over here. You start thinking you got it, you come out with a different thing over here. So concept shifting. Here's where we start to do things like, can you combine, contrast, can you recategorize, can you criticize or question? Here we do things like anti-examples, counter debate, break yourself. That's one of the things I used to tell my old students. Your first essay would always be about the brain. Tell me something about the brain. Cool. Your second essay would always be, you now need to disprove everything you just said in that first essay. Oh, they hated it, but that's the only way I knew to get them to start shifting. If you can argue both sides of an argument, that demonstrates you have deep, you can start to now play with that. Peer teaching, discussing, thinking routines here say, I used to think, now I think, circle of viewpoints. All we're doing is now playing with our concepts. Final level of contextualization, now you apply and personalize. You've built all these facts, you've built these concepts, you play with these concepts. Sooner or later, you got to draw a line in the sand and say, man, if I understand this correctly, I should be able to do this. If I do all this and all this is correct and I do A, then B should be my outcome. Here's where you now put it to the test. This, by the way, isn't the end. You'll keep cycling back, but sooner or later, you've got to write an essay. You've got to say, well, right now, today, here's how I get it. So here's where you're doing an experiment or a design or a self-reflect simulation, outreach, go into the community, try it out, micro labs, creative questioning. Why do you say that? So that's hurdle number 2. Hurdle number 1, we get the knowledge, the facts. Hurdle number 2, we use those facts to recontextualize our skills, our abilities, our competencies. How do these facts change these definitions? Transfer lesson number 2 then. If one is skill transfer requires new domain knowledge redefines and can confuse relevant skills. If domain knowledge redefines the skill, sometimes that can screw us up. Sometimes we just use domain knowledge. Like, here's what I'm thinking about. Driving, right? I grew up in the US driving with the stick shift on my right. Been in Australia for 12 years with the stick shift on my left. But anytime I'm stressed, what do you think I do? I get into the wrong side of the car and reach for a steering wheel that's no longer there. What happens is I'm just using the domain knowledge, car, and I activate my skill, must get in this side, forgetting that I had to redefine it. Oh, nope, it's actually this side. So domain knowledge redefines, and that can sometimes lead to confusion as to what skill is relevant at the time. So it's always, again, it's a conscious process we got to go through. This, by the way, was Carly Fiorina's problem. She learned all about HP. She did the knowledge hurdle, but then she did the exact same strategy she did at her other company here. She didn't tweak anything, didn't change anything, and it just didn't work with those new facts. So contextualization. Final hurdle is here, adaptation. So we built these facts, we've redefined our skills. This final hurdle says now you've got to tweak your skills to match this new definition. Now, this is probably the hardest hurdle to get over. To understand why this is so difficult, there are 3 foundations we need to piece together. This will be pretty quick. So foundation number 1 is here. I want to play one final quick game with you. On this next set of slides, I'm going to pop up a word in that box. Each word is going to be written in a different colored font. Your job is wherever you're at, out loud as quickly as you can, and you don't have to unmute yourself, just do it where you're at. Say what color each word is written in. So I don't want to hear the word. I don't care about the word. I want to know what color the letters of each word are. Now, again, as quickly as you can, let's see what happens. Here we go. Do you feel it? You get that kind of crunch, that push, that pull. Foundation number one is this: modularity. You don't have a brain. You've got dozens and dozens of independent brains all chugging away, all doing their own thing up here. So go back here. You see something like the word purple written in the color red. You've got one bit of your brain that likes what? Words. Does it care what else is happening? No, I'm word bit. There's a word. I'm going to do my job. You got another bit of your brain that likes what? Colors. Does it care what else is going on in this world? No, I'm color bit. If there's a color, I'm going to do it. You got word bit. You got color bit. We can feel these two different brains battling. And that's foundation number one. The brain isn't a unified thing. It's dozens of independent modules or networks all doing their own thing. Foundation number two then is here. Your brain is made out of neurons. These are specialized cells that make up your brain. Now, neurons only have one job. All they do is they pass messages. So information comes into all these arms here, shoots down that long tube, spits out all these arms here. So this means when we talk about the brain, we don't really care about neurons. Neurons are neurons are neurons. We care about here, where neurons communicate, where a message goes from one to another. Now, those little spots are called synapses. Synapses, this is the important unit of measure when we talk about the brain. But then we got to worry about this: neuroplasticity. So you have all heard of that term before: neuroplasticity, neuro, brain, plasticity. In this case, things in this world are either concrete or they're plastic. Concrete things don't change, plastic things change. Neuroplasticity says your brain can change. Now, what's changing in there? Are we getting more or less neurons? No, it's the synapses. You get more or less output points, more or less input points. The way your brain communicates is always changing based on your thoughts, based on your actions. So foundation number two is this idea of synaptic plasticity, that our brain is changing. And foundation number three then is here. It's a concept called bottom-up versus top-down processing. Now, if you took a course with me at uni, we would spend an entire week on this topic. I'm going to cover it with you in 30 seconds. So necessarily, this is going to be a bit dirty, but hopefully it'll make sense. So your brain basically has two modes it can be in to process the world. Top-down is when your brain is active. It's trying to rewrite stories. It's trying to redefine how it makes sense of the world. Bottom up is when your brain is passive, just running autopilot. Like, oh, I've seen this a million times. I'm just going to go do my thing. I'm making a prediction. I'm fine. So think about it like this. Think back to learning how to drive. Do you remember how miserable that was? That's top down. Your arms, you can't seem to coordinate. You can't really, that's your brain going into that active mode saying, uh-oh, is this like a video game? Is this like what are we doing here? Now, how many of you have driven more recently? And how many of you looked a bit more like that? Doesn't matter how complex a skill or an ability or a thought is, once you've got that thing locked down, your brain can run on autopilot. You don't even have to think about it. So that's our third foundation. We got modularity, synaptic plasticity, this idea of bottom-up, top-down processing. Now, real quick, I want to talk about learning. So at the most foundational level, at the basic biological level, learning really only requires one thing. There is only one essential ingredient anything in this universe needs if it ever wants to learn anything. What is that ingredient? It's not desire. Believe it or not, I've learned many of things that I don't care. I know my wife's seats in her car are this kind of pleated fabric and there's a cigarette burn on the back. Don't care, never tried to learn it. Learned it all the same, so it's not desire. Maybe you have to have a brain. Plants are really good at learning. They don't have a brain, so you don't even need that. What's the one ingredient? Repetition, 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 repetition. Or as that someone pointed out, I left one of the eyes out in repetition on that image. So repetiton. The key to all learning is repetiton. But here we go. So now something like desire or having an effective brain might change the amount of repetition you have to do, might increase the influence of each repetition, but at the end of the day, this is the biological mechanism by which learning occurs. Repetition, repetition, repetition. Now, as you repeat, what happens? So let's say I start something new, golf. I've never golfed a day in my life. So I go out there with my club and I'm just swinging it around. What mode is my brain going to start in whenever I start learning something new? Top down. This is when your brain kicks on and says, what are you doing? Is this like baseball? Is this like cricket? What's happening? Now I keep repeating. I'm starting to develop some fluency. What's my brain doing now? Here's where we're getting that plasticity. Our brain's going, okay, you seem to be doing this a lot. Why don't I make that a little easier for you? Why don't I make that a little more efficient for you? Now I keep repeating. My goodness, I'm getting pretty damn smooth with this. What does my brain do now? Now it builds a module. It says, my goodness, you are doing this so much. Why don't we just build a module? Why don't we devote an entire part of the brain to nothing but this? We're going to make this as effective and efficient as possible for you. Now I keep repeating. I'm getting so dang smooth. What does my brain do now? Bottom up. That's when you slip into just pure autopilot. Your brain can run this. You don't even have to be there. So through repetition, the brain will move top down, plasticity, build a module, bottom up. As you practice any skill in any context, top down, plasticity, build a module, bottom up. Now, I just want to point out real fast, your brain will go through this process anything you do. So if you practice something horribly, cool, your brain will go top down, plasticity, build a module, bottom up, and you will have this automatic pilot of horrible behavior. So it's not that when people say practice makes perfect. No, practice makes permanent. That's it. But whether it's good or bad, it's going to do the same thing. So that's why if I did golf and I just sucked every day, I'd get really good at sucking at golf. That's fine. So it's not that practice makes perfect. It's perfect practice makes perfect. But otherwise, the brain is going to do this whatever you do. Now, remember, we're talking about transfer, and we saw the 3 hurdles: knowledge, context, adaptation. We're talking about tweaking our skills to match a new definition. Question: as I take any skill down this process, top down, plasticity, build a module, bottom up, as I move any skill through this process in any one context, what happens to my ability to adapt or change that skill? You probably got it. It narrows. Adaptability narrows with automaticity. In a very real sense, the more automatic a skill becomes in any one context, the harder it becomes for you to change that skill. Why? Because this is what I meant when I said we're biologically not built to transfer. We have locked it down so hard we don't even know we're doing it anymore. And now if I need to change it, I have to somehow consciously pull up this skill and be like, oh, no, I want to try it like this. And your brain will be like, so let's say I pull up a skill and I start tweaking it for 2 hours. After I'm done tweaking it, guess what my brain is going to do? It's going to go right back to normal. It's going to be like, that was a fun 2 hours, but we spent 2 years doing it this way. So we're just going to go back to what we know. Adaptability narrows with automaticity. Now, it's not impossible. 2 things to recognize. It is not impossible to adapt a skill. We do it all the time. It's just not automatic. You have to consciously work through that process. And 2, we think adapting a skill moves faster than initial learning of that skill. So let's say it took me 2 years to lock down a specific baseball swing. It won't take me 2 years to lock down a new baseball swing. It might only take me 2 months. But the thing is, so we think the adaptability, moving a skill into a new realm, is faster than that initial learning, but it's not automatic. You've got to consciously work it, and you have to keep coming back to it because your body, your brain will keep going the other way. Tiger Woods, perfect example, one of the greatest athletes in the world with a golf club in his hands. Replace it with a baseball, the guy can't throw. He can't even move his athletic ability from one sport to another. Now, it's not impossible. If he put in the time and the effort, he'd be able to get good at baseball. It's just not an automatic thing. Neither was driving. I got really good in the US, moved to Australia. I couldn't even move my skill 6 inches from one seat to another. Took me a couple months. I got good at it, but it wasn't automatic. So adaptability narrows with automaticity. That's our final transfer lesson. So here are our 3 hurdles for transfer: knowledge, context, adaptation. Knowledge, you have to develop the facts. Context, you have to use those facts to redefine your skills. Adaptation, we now need to tweak our skill to match this new definition. Knowledge, context, adaptation. Knowledge, context, adaptation. Say knowledge, context, adaptation. That sounds familiar. I'll bet I could redefine these 3 words in a single word. What is it? Learning. That is the learning process. Transfer is synonymous with learning. Transfer is exactly the same thing as learning. This means the people who know how to learn are the people who know how to transfer. They're the ones who move faster, easier into whatever field you take them into. It's never automatic, but they know how to do it, so they do it faster. This also means whoever knows how to transfer knows how to learn. So if you really want to talk about a 21st century skill, a competency that our kids need, it's learning. That's the one thing that if you know how to do, everything else follows off the back of that. So more important than creativity, critical, all that stuff, it's learning. Now, when we talk about transfer, here are the terms we use: knowledge, context, adaptation. But when we talk about learning, we don't use these 3 terms. The terms you're more likely to hear are this: surface learning deep learning, and adaptive transfer or transformative learning. And I know that's kind of weird because that word transfer comes in that last thing, but it's adaptation. Just know adaptive transfer is adaptation. That's why a lot of people are calling it transformative now. Just seems to be easier, but that's it. Knowledge, context, adaptation. You understand these hurdles, you understand the learning process: surface learning, deep learning, and adaptive transfer learning. So, okay, I got to skip this last part. I was sorry, I prepped for a little bit more time than we had, but that's all I've got for you all today. So real quick, a quick shameless plug. If you kind of like these concepts, this idea of the science of learning, just know I have a YouTube channel where every couple of weeks or so, I just put out a video where I'll take a look at a piece of research that looks at learning, and I'll just translate it for us as teachers. I'll say, this is what this means for us as teachers. So if you just kind of like this stuff and you want to keep playing around with it, just know that's a good resource for you to use. Otherwise, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I'll stop sharing my screen here, and I'm happy to stick around and answer any questions or thoughts or anything you guys might have.